Cool. All right, we are back for a couple more topics in our fourth day of PTG. All of the other sessions were recorded, so please take a look at them in case you are curious to know what we discussed. And now we are joined by Stephen to to talk about another topic, which is at response schema validation. So, Stephen, floor is yours.
How you doing? So I've talked about this with a couple of projects this week so far. Artem with an E, GTEMA, he's been exploring adding open API schemas for a variety of services over the past year or so. Currently, he has all of those schemas kept out of tree in a separate repo. And we would like to get away from doing that and to get us to the point where we're integrating them into the projects themselves. So the reason that we want the open API schemas is it gives us a way of validating the API and testing that the behavior of the API and making sure that it doesn't change unexpectedly. It also gives us the ability to generate API documentation from that, similar to what we do with OS API Ref at the moment, but with a more standard or widespread mechanism for doing that. And from Artem's perspective, it gives us the ability to go and auto-generate tooling, or at least compare the API client implementations we have, the likes of OpenStack SDK, against the actual API schemas and make sure that what we're documenting actually makes sense and is valid, and we haven't done something that's obviously incorrect. So the proposal here is to effectively integrate all of these schemas into Manila itself. So I've had a look through the Manila code base, and I see that you're already using schemas mainly for the request side of things. So I have a couple of kind of steps that I'm proposing. The first of these would be to it basically investigates the schemas that are there for request bodies, and if they are there for query strings, make sure that those are correct, fill in any gaps that might exist, and basically get everything in shipshape. And then once we have that stuff done, move on to adding a whole load of additional schemas to cover response bodies. So these will look exactly like the request body schemas, only they'll test the response bodies. We'll have decorators, most likely. Manila uses slightly different API tooling to Nova and Cinder, but probably decorators that will add attributes to the various methods that actually provide the backing. We'll say they actually provide the implementation of the various API resources and API resource methods. And there'll be a tool that will effectively pull all of those JSON schema things and combine them into one big open API spec. So what this will look like from a review perspective is a whole load of dictionaries being added and a couple of additional decorators, both the implementations of them and the actual wrappers, like the application of those decorators to the various API methods. And the tooling that will actually generate the open API schemas themselves, we're planning on keeping that separate, because even though different services do things slightly differently with regards to the web frameworks, there are only about 3 or 4 different web frameworks in use across OpenStack. So long as we agree on a common implementation mechanism for this, i.e. how we're going to correlate the schemas with the actual API resource and method, we should be able to use the same tool globally across that. Where that tool will live is not something that we need to worry about here. This spec or this work for Manila would purely be adding the missing schemas and adding documentation to those schemas. Things like actually using the resulting open API schema for documentation, again, that isn't really covered by this. I don't envision that this will get accomplished this cycle, because there's simply too much work to do. But at some point, I'd like to remove the OS API ref stuff that we have in favor of effectively a directive within our docs that just points to the Open API thing. With regards to that question about somebody relying on the existing API refs, I suspect not, because it's not really machine readable at the moment. There's a whole load is restructured text. You could, and I have tried doing this and not got very far, you could build the docs in XML format and attempt to kind of make that somewhat machine readable, but you're having to rely on a whole load of heuristics that aren't naturally that aren't obvious, as opposed to OpenAPI, which is designed to be machine readable. Like I said, I've talked to a couple of other projects about this week. I would hope to do it as similarly as possible for those various projects. So I have a couple of questions down there. I've got answers, and we've got pretty consistent answers, so I'm hoping to get the same answers here. Because my time is going to be mainly split across Cinder, Keystone, and Nova this cycle, I suspect that all I'll get done on this cycle is effectively getting the stuff bootstrapped. But Artem and I are chatting to Kendall at the moment about a new round of students. So this is something that we might be able to get students to work on.
Stephen, you went mute.
I've just been talking for 5 minutes.
No, I think we got it just happened in the last 10 seconds.
10 seconds or something.
Okay, excellent. All right, sweet. I don't know why it muted me. That's pretty much that. A whole load of JSON schemas in there, a couple of decorators, a couple of additions of those decorators to the actual methods to correlate the schemas with the actual methods under test. Mostly self-testing, because we have good API test coverage in our unit tests. So I'm hoping that basically by running our unit tests, so long as our unit tests are passing in syntactically valid, like API schema valid data. In some cases in Nova, I found that isn't the case, and I've had to fix the unit tests to do that. But so long as they are doing that, the unit test should highlight bugs in our schema and vice versa. There'll be a lot of large reviews, but they're going to be basically big-ass dictionaries. They shouldn't be all that complicated. And again, self-validating because of tests. And the bootstrapping of this will be done this cycle, and I suspect the fleshing out of it will probably happen next cycle. I don't think this is something that we'll be able to get done in one cycle, so it might stretch across like 2 or 3 cycles. But it can be iterative, and I don't think that's a bad thing. There isn't going to be a big cost to having this stuff inside there. And even if we only get 2 or 3 of the APIs done, there is intrinsic value in just those 2 or 3 APIs because we get validation for those 2 or 3 APIs that we can see in our tests. Questions? Anything? Does that make sense? Does any of that not make sense?
So one that's in line. So you said we're not going to do this for any deprecated APIs. We have an entire endpoint that's deprecated, but still in code today. So we would not be doing that for that endpoint, right?
Yeah, so I discussed this with the other teams over the course of the week. My only argument for doing this for deprecated APIs was if you wanted to continue to provide documentation for those APIs in the future, and we got rid of OS API ref in favor of generating the Open API docs. In that, if those 2 things happen, then if we don't document them, or if we don't add schemas to them, then when we switch over tools, we'll lose the documentation for those deprecated APIs. I don't think there isn't a reason to do the things now, because A, that switch isn't going to happen this cycle, and B, if it does, we can either make a decision, right, we're not actually going to document these deprecated APIs, or we are, and now we just need to go and retrospectively add the schemas. In either case, it doesn't need to happen this cycle.
Yeah. So this is another tech debt item for us. So we're testing it, the V1 API, but we're not.
Yeah.
We've not. We made a conscious choice not to do the API ref documentation for V1.
Yeah.
It
So
was it's not documented, but it's just being tested. But so we, because we don't really know who is using this in the wild, which is why
yeah.
we've left it as is in the testing. So I mean, but we've had it in this deprecated state for years now, which means I think it's time to try to kill it by
Yeah.
starting with peeling off the tests and stuff. So
Yeah.
maybe
So
that's a
they
side.
exactly. So yeah, in that case, from the V1 perspective, yeah, V1 is effectively irrelevant then for this effort. The one other thing, I don't know if Manila does this, but Nova has a couple of APIs that have been either removed in a micro version and you need to use an old micro version to get the previous behavior. So a lot of the proxy APIs for Cinder, Ironic, and Nova and Neutron rather. There's those, and then there's other APIs that correspond to features that no longer exist, like Nova Network and Sales V1.
Yeah.
If you do the first one, you'll get I think you get a 404 unless you request the previous micro version. If you try to use the second group of APIs,
what to do,
you'll get a 410, 410 gone, regardless of micro version. Do you have any of those in Manila or
just Nova Network? So the 410 case would just be about Nova Network. We did support it at some point. So that's the same thing. And we do have schema changes between API micro versions. How does that work?
So the way that works in Nova, which is the pattern that I plan on copying, is the decorators that we wrap around the methods to tag, like associate a schema with a method. They accept a min version and a max version argument. So if those aren't given, it's assumed that the schema applies to every micro version. If those are given, the min version is where the schema starts applying, max version is obviously where it stops, and you just have different, you have multiple decorators for each API micro version change. So it can mean that for some of the more complex, so like Nova's servers API and I guess Manila's shares API, where you've had a lot of micro version changes, you can end up with like 20 decorators. Yeah, tacked on. I was chatting about that with the Ironic folks. If that ended up making the code a little bit too hard to read, we'll just create like a meta decorator that effectively calls all the other decorators and just stick it in a different file. It's not it's just code. It's easy to kind of rework. But a decorator with arguments for version related arguments is how we achieve this.
Okay, makes sense. And on the removed APIs, what were you going to say about that? Saying it won't be possible to validate it, so don't add anything for those.
Yeah, so you for the ones that are removed with 410, there's no way of validating them. So the best we can do is best effort. This is a guess. This is how we think it worked if we were to go and add it retrospectively to, a release from 5 years ago or something. I haven't bothered doing it in Nova. All that I've done is I've added another decorator for specifically marking up those methods as, this is removed, i.e. skip any validation check, skip any checks to make sure that the schemas exist for this. So I've 3, again, Nova's been my prototype for this, but I have 3 new tests added to Nova, or rather one test that tests 3 things. And what it's checking for is for every, I look at the router, I look for all the methods associated with the router, the API router. And for each of those, I make sure that there is a schema associated with each of those methods, each of those resources and each of those methods. And if there isn't, you need to go and add the missing schemas. Except if those methods are decorated with this thing that says this is a removed API, i.e. I should not have a schema there. I suspect we'd be doing the exact same thing here. There's no point in decorating them for remove things. It's of no use.
Makes sense. And since I've not seen how this works, I also have a note question saying if somebody is adding something new to an API, these validation tests would fail if you were not adjusting the tests in place, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So you get self-validation going forward, and eventually you'll get your automated documentation from that schema that you've added. So in theory, you add a new field to a resource or to a response, you update the schema, and that should cover your tests. Like you'll probably want to add a new test that makes sure that that does whatever you need to do to get that new field, or maybe it just happens automatically. But your schema will start failing if you've forgotten to add the field, which means that your doc should always be up to date. Eventually, when we get to that point.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think this is a really cool thing. I mean, we missed the whole JSON schema train, and we didn't really have anybody asking for it, and OS API ref happened around the same time. So we thought that's where we're consolidating. So it's pretty cool that we're able to revive Open API documentation and also trying to build tools out of this. I think it's really useful. But like you said, I think we would definitely look for examples and some guidance on this. And if you are having student interns, I think we'll just join along and probably learn and try to do some of this stuff with them and help with this. But your question on line 166. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, my plan for this is, as I've noted there about the majority of the work, I kind of answered that it is going to be students, or anyone that's interested in writing a whole load of JSON schema. But my plan would be effectively, as I said there, to bootstrap the thing, figure out how to get these decorators to actually work, identify the places where we're missing schemas, and then add an example response schema that demonstrates what it should look like.
Yeah.
I'm planning on fully fledging the Nova one out because I have the vast majority of that done now. And ditto, I have a good chunk of the Cinder stuff done, and I haven't started on Keystone yet. But yeah, I don't envision there should be any serious difficulties.
Okay. Perfect. I mean, this sounds great. And is this also going to be a community goal, or do you want to just get a head start on it before declaring one or something like that?
Yeah, I'd like to basically push most projects to do something like this, because a lot of the projects are using JSON schema for request validation already. So this feels like quite a natural fit. It would certainly make, in the long term, it would certainly make our lives easier with that, like with my OpenStack, like my SDK/CLI hat on, and like with my Gopher Cloud hat on.
Yeah.
It would be a lot easier to be able to validate all of this stuff automatically against the schema. So yeah, it is something that I would push as a community goal, but probably once I've got at least Nova over the line and spitting out a nice, well-formatted schema that we're able to consume somewhere.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. I had no further questions. I'm actually curious about digging into the Nova code to see how actions and extensions are handled. I suppose extensions are gone now, but actions, at least, that was the previous Open API thing when I was looking at this a few years ago.
Yeah, that's Artem's kind of baby. Effectively, though, it relies on extensions. So X-prefixed extensions to the schema that allow us to set like discriminators effectively and determine, depending on the body, this is the response you get. Yeah. So you'll need, like, you won't be able to just take, for the action stuff anyway, you won't be able to just take off the, a generic OpenAPI code generator off the shelf and use it unmodified. But so long as this is why the tool should live outside of the service projects and should live somewhere independently. So long as we're consistently generating the same extension like fields for the various service projects, we should be able to do it pretty consistently.
Makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay. In that case, if there's no other questions, what I'll do is I'll get a spec up. The spec will effectively be a carbon copy of the Nova and Cinder one, just with Manila semantics, obviously, instead of the Nova and Cinder ones. And then at some point, hopefully as early as possible in the cycle, I'll work to get that that bootstrap effort up and running, just so you can see what it'll actually look like and how we're doing it. I have the Nova stuff, like I said, half done. The only reason I haven't pushed it is because there's about 36 patches in the series at the moment, and I don't want to kill their CI.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wait until 5 o'clock tonight and push it off and let it run over the weekend. So
Nice.
they should be there come Monday to have a look at.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you mind? Firstly, wait, let me pause. If anybody else has any questions about this or comments. If not, I was going to bother you about the SQL Alchemy stuff that we just finished, earlier today. And I copied you onto the backport. I squashed all of your changes that have come from the master branch.
Yep.
And I'm hoping we can get this merged, because it looks like people, distributors are not going to avoid SQL Alchemy 2.0 and Caracal. Just this is what you were predicting anyway. So I think this is going to satisfy them. I did add a job. The job probably has a mistake in the manifest, but it did run, and it passed the SQL Alchemy 2.0 job on this branch. But we're not going to merge it. I had a question for you, saying, are other projects running SQL Alchemy 2.0 tests on Caracal?
They were. They no longer are. So if you have a look at that job, you'll see that there's a branch filter to make sure that it only runs on the master branch. So obviously, until we fought, most of those I think all of those projects have had the tips jobs for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
So they would have been running the whole way through the C cycle. Like I said, they no longer are, but they were. So they should be all good.
See, so I changed that branch filter to say stable 2024.1 just to get it to run against this squash. But I was wondering if we should just leave a real job in Caracal just in case. And I mean, unlikely that we'll introduce regressions, but it's wise, right?
Yes and no. The issue, if you did that, I'd probably pin to
it's 2.0
the latest
exactly.
version.
Yeah, instead of
well, not 2.0.0 because there was quite a few bugs in there.
Okay.
But I would go to whatever the latest version of SQL Alchemy is today, and the latest version of Alembic, and the latest version of Oslo DB, and pin all three of those.
Okay.
The rationale being that we don't want to be testing against the master in a year's time.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense.
That's the reason that we had it, that I set it up with the branch filter, that it would only run on master. I didn't want to be breaking stable branches. So that'd be my suggestion.
Yeah.
We could ask about getting exception to backport the bump to the requirements branch up for
Caracal.
Yeah, for Caracal, but I don't know if we've ever done that, and I don't know if it would be allowed.
I was going to ask. It was on the TC's Etherpad. I don't know if you're going to bring it up in discussion, but it's worth asking. And I think the reason is we'll be matching reality, right, at that point, because people are using it anyway. They're just ignoring your upper constraints. So
that's what I think. And I know Rel Fedora doesn't ship 1.4 anymore. Rel probably is packaging SQL Alchemy 2. I know Debian is because Thomas, what's his name? Zito keep shouting at us. So and therefore Ubuntu is using it too. So as you say, it's pretty much just reflecting reality. The only thing would be that we'll be dropping that patch at the moment, drops support for SQL Alchemy Migrate. Yeah. Now, no project should be using that. The only one I'm aware of is Freezer, which isn't a gating project for requirements. So they'll just need to backport their fixes as well. But what harm? It's not that hard to do. So
Makes sense.
That's something I probably want to chat to the TC about. I didn't actually realize that they were even considering that.
Yeah. No, it was on the TC, the button I could link you to it. But I don't know if
Yeah.
it was just generally we're not compatible versus what are we going to
Yeah.
do with Caracal?
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be my preference anyway, if they allowed themselves to do that. But either way, it's fixed in Dalmatian, and we have alternative ways of testing stuff, such as backporting that job and using the latest and greatest versions of the various libraries.
Makes sense. Thank you. And we did have another couple of questions. I'm gonna just ping you privately on that because I think you can answer them whenever you have some time. It's gonna be more out of curiosity and more of a developer mindset stuff. It's on line 106 and 107 of this Etherpad, and it's because you've delved into this file where we're doing all the queries. You probably saw some weird things that you want to follow.
I can answer that real quick. I don't think it's that bad. The thing I found surprising, there are a couple of cases where what was it? The thing that I got stuck on for ages that I needed, to drag mic in for.
Yeah.
That I've tried to rejig that a few times, but the general idea of doing multiple things within the database layer that are dependent on state from previous transactions is annoying, and it is a potential. Well, it was a source of bugs basically that we got stuck in it for ages.
Yeah.
And that's quite unorthodox from Manila's own design perspective, because as I noted in my attempt to fix that, all other quota operations happen
in the
at the application
manager
level except for this one. So getting away from that would be great. The other thing that still needs to be resolved is there's a lot of use of backref within the models. That is deprecated behavior now in 2.0 in favor of backpopulates. So the issue with backref is if you have two models, you define a field in one of those models that stakes the backref to the other ones. That creates like a magic attribute or magic property on that other model that isn't visible by the likes of any typing tooling or like your IDE or whatever. So by using backpopulates, you define the field on both, and all your type checkers and everything are able to find it then.
I see.
So I don't think they're going to remove it until 3.0, but I went and I fixed that in, I think, Cinder and Nova, and it was, I'll find out. I have a little blog thing on it actually that I'll stick into the doc here. What else? I think the only other one then was just the sheer size of the DB API layer. There's a lot of code in there, but I think that's just because there's a lot of resources in Manila to be concerned with. So the only kind of way of getting rid of that is effectively to do what Nova's done for the API database, where it actually took all the code. There's no like nova.db.api model. They just moved all of the stuff in beside the objects, the OVO objects, and put them all in as like static or class methods. That could be slightly nicer from a readability perspective, but it's not that big a deal, to be honest. Here is the blog post, and let me just find what line. That's the little blog thing I wrote the time that I was figuring out how to do this for Nova. So this should define effectively how to go about doing it and why it's needed to do it.
Yeah, no, I was surprised when I saw that patch that you had about changing strings to class names, because I had to go read each one, and I was jumping between models, and I was like, I'm sure you would have to do that. It was painful. So I can imagine.
Yeah. Not fun, but it's one of those things. Once it's done, it hopefully never has to be done again.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you again. I guess we thanked you a lot in the session where you didn't join. So I'll say it again. It was tremendous work, and we were, I don't know, I don't know how much of a help we were, but it was really nice to have that external support as far as we're concerned. Mainly because it was a lot of lack of knowledge in this community, and I think it's growing. So thanks for bringing it in.
No bother. Happy to help.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, can't even value how you know how much we've helped with all of this series and helping figure out all of the issues that showed up with that. So thank you very much for your hard work on this.
Cheers. Okay. If there's no other questions on the two of those, I might let you get back to the rest of your agenda and drop.
Yeah.
Great.
Spot on. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you for
Thank you.
joining us.
Cheers. Catch you later.
All right. I think Takashi just managed to join it. I'll ping him and see if he can do the last slot, if he can make it for the last slot, so that we can move shares encryption for now, if that's okay with everyone.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll need to re-update the slots later on, but yeah, that's all good, I think. So let's is that okay with you, Kiran, Saravanan?
Sorry?
Is that okay with you moving the shares encryption topic for now?
Yeah, it's fine. I don't have any questions. What was the question? Like, someone can ask me or ping me on email, whatever question he has. So, apart from that, I think we have covered a lot of things on the spec only, and I have also raised the pull request, kind of. So one can review those pull requests and also raise the questions there.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so would you like to get started, Saravanan? I'll ping Takashi. Let's see.
Yeah, I can ping him actually. Even after that, right? Even I went through thoroughly what OnTap is doing with respect to encryption key and so how it is using. Yeah. So yeah, I have some questions. Okay, I thought Kiran will present. Yeah, I can talk to Kiran directly. Yeah, not him. Yeah.
Sorry,
So because even is my
no,
voice clear? Or?
yeah, your voice is clear. So I was under the assumption that you have some questions to ask, and also others have questions to ask uh, on the front of spec. So that was my assumption. Like otherwise, I mean, if you want me to revise the spec which is already merged, then I can revise it.
No, not needed actually. Okay. We
Okay.
can sync up. Only one question. We are going to implement this feature in the Dalmatian release, right? You're going to do that.
Yeah. So
Just
I
the
have created two pull requests for the encryption. So I'm expecting a review as soon as possible, and if possible, then we can, like, others can review, and hopefully I'll continue to work and merge this in the dynamic interface. So it's all about the reviews. The sample pull requests are already there.
Kiran, do you think we can do an early collab review since is it code complete at this point?
Yeah. Apart from Tempest test and the support in Manila client and etc., the
Okay.
Manila thing is ready. So what I'll do is I'll also create the Manila client pull request, and then we can have the collab review.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, because I mean, folks might be able to try it as well and
Yeah.
give you better feedback.
Okay.
Why we are keen? There are 2 3 asks from customers.
Uh,
Only that's a point. Yeah, because NetApp is already supporting a key, but anyway, that is like data addressed, so not the level of encryption that we see via Bobrican. Yeah.
yeah. So
So just wanted to.
NetApp currently supports encryption at the vServer level. That's there. But apart from that, we have a standalone external key manager. So
Yes.
what we
Onboard
want
key
is
manager.
that
NetApp supports two. It supports onboard key manager. It means like even storage only can provide keys and you can manage it. And one more, even external key manager, the third party key manager. It supports both. And
right.
yeah,
So these are the keys, but this keys has to be like so with the share encryption, there are two ways. One can provide the information related to the encryption and talk with the key manager, get the key, and pass it to the backend driver so that it does the encryption work. Because the encryption is backend, it's not a front end. And the second is the way where you need not to talk with the key manager. You simply pass the key from Manila API and it goes to the backend. So in NetApp, as you said, like we support external key manager. Uh, the use case is the same that the external key manager, whichever has been configured, the key is being made available to the customer, and the customer will use the Manila API to pass it to the NetApp so that NetApp internally use this key to talk with the external key manager and perform the encryption.
okay. So, so the question is, OpenStack, will it be able to talk to the sectional key manager? Do we have that infra?
No, no, it's a backend driver who
Backend
should be
driver
able
thing.
to
Okay.
talk, yeah, key manager. In this case, in the second case, in the first case,
Second case.
yeah, in the first case where we provide the encryption information to generate the key, the Manila should be able to talk with the key manager. For example, the Barbican. So Manila talks with the Barbican through Castilian API, the way it does in Cinder. But for the NetApp use case, where Manila need not to talk with this external key manager, it just need a way to pass the key to the key manager.
Okay. Actually, I was in that Cinder PTG yesterday, and the same request came like there is one somebody presented. They want to pass their own key to Cinder for this encryption, and Brian, right? I think they made some comments, and yeah, so they said maybe not possible, something like that. They made some comment yesterday. It is there in that
No,
Cinder
no,
PTG.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure whether Cinder supports the external key
yeah,
manager or
okay.
not, but the one that it supports today is that it talks with the key manager. For example, Barbican, and then it
Okay,
generates
yeah,
the key, it passes the Nova, and then Nova uses the libvirt API to volume attach detach. In a volume
so
attach detach, it uses this key for performing the encryption.
okay. So yeah. One point to note there, they mentioned yesterday, Bobrican keys user cannot pass anything. Only Bobrican, it will generate automatically. It will use it for volume encryption. And if you pass our own key, right, things will not work. I mean, that's what they mentioned yesterday. Maybe you can check that video.
Right,
Maybe in
right.
Manila, I
So,
wanted to see. Yeah, Manila, I wanted to see how it is going to happen.
right. See,
Okay.
the first path where we generate the key through the Barbican is only applicable when both Manila and the backend driver should be able to talk with the Barbican. So Manila first talks with the Barbican, it asks for the key from the key information, and then it passes to the backend driver. Now the backend driver again talks with the the Barbican to fetch the actual key from this key reference and then perform the encryption. So how it performs the encryption, it up to the backend driver, because in this case the key has been generated from the Barbican. So that is the key reference that Barbican hands over to you, and you need to pass this reference again to get the actual key to perform the encryption. On the other hand, in the second case, it's an actual key. It's not a
Hmm.
reference. It's the actual key which it passes to the backend driver, and then the backend driver will pass this key to the external key manager. For example, whatever the key manager you will be using and passing the NetApp command to perform the encryption, you just need to replace that key value by the key that is being passed using the Manila API. So for the NetApp, it's a easy path. It's just like passing here and passing to the backend. The first part is the one where both Manila and the backend should be able to talk with the key manager. This key manager. In case of Cinder, what it happens is that Cinder generates the key reference and passes to the Nova. Then Nova fetches the key
Yeah.
and passes to the libword.
Yeah. Okay. So okay.
Yeah, so the backend driver doesn't come into the picture in case of Cinder attached in the
That's not okay. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But in case of Manila, if so, Barbican is one example. You can have any other key manager where you can make that key manager accessible to the Manila as well as to your backend driver and use this functionality. It's up to what key manager we use. So right now, whatever I have tested is to make sure that the code API talks with the Barbican to get the key and then pass this key reference to the backend driver, and the work stops there because I don't have any backend driver which talks with the Barbican to get the key
Ah,
and perform the actual encryption. In case one, in case two, it's a simple because we are just passing the
uh,
key from Manila API to the NetApp.
so at least maybe I forget about driver. Maybe for LVM driver, right? Maybe you have to see end to end. So example, after we create a share, when we mount the share with VM, and when it is encrypted, right? We have to see whether really we are able to see the data or we are not able to see the data. Maybe once we see this complete thing end to end, right? And then we can look at what we can do from NetApp driver level. I mean, but have you tested end to end when you did this activity, like not just like creating a volume, but after that we mount the volume with VM and
No, no.
make
So,
sure like
so
uh,
encryption is something not tested because I don't have any reference. In
okay,
case of Nova, it's a running virtual machine.
yeah.
So they can use the libvirt API. We don't have anything in the Manila to do this. So what you have is just the reference of the key that you got from the Barbican and you pass to the backend driver.
Okay, we'll discuss more. I think I got it. Yeah, it's not going to be a lot of, I mean, workflow difference is there. Yeah, Cinder and Manila. Yeah, that is very clear. Yeah, and
Yeah, the
we'll
Cinder working
discuss it.
operation is
Yeah, yeah,
different.
different.
There
Yeah, no
it's a
problem.
live
Yeah,
encryption, you can say as well, because the key is passed to the Nova and Nova uses the libvirt to do all this stuff. In Manila, that is not the case. In Manila, once we pass the key to the backend driver, whatever the function it will be, internally has to talk with some share manager to attach, basically mount the volume. First create the volume, then mount it, perform the encryption, unmount it, something like this.
So, I mean, the way you put it, at least, would it be possible with the generic driver?
I am not sure. I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is the way you're putting it across is so the way Cinder's encryption works is if a end user comes and gives you a reference of an encrypted an encryption key, which is actually something is sitting in Barbican. And Cinder is doing some interaction with Nova in order to apply that encryption onto that volume or decryption onto that volume, right? That's kind of what the thing seems to be. So that whole flow can be simulated with the generic driver because we are using Cinder volumes to backend the shares, and they are on a Nova VM. They are being exported via an OVM, so they're actually being attached to an OVM. In a sense, it's going to be similar to what you would implement, let's say, in Saravanan's driver, which is it is a back-end encryption. When you're reading it out of the wire, it's not really encrypted, but when it is in the backend, the data is actually encrypted.
Hmm. So you're saying that internally the generic driver uses the Cinder volumes and the Nova virtual machine. So
Yeah.
we need to plug into their path.
Yeah, it's worth exploring, I think, because then you would have a way to end test this as well. Beyond, of course, giving an example to driver implementations as to what they can do with this, but also in our own CI we'd be able to test this.
Okay. I'm not sure about the Nova and Cinder. Basically, I have looked into the code of how the Nova and Cinder works, but I'm not sure how easy it would be to replicate in
To
Manila.
do that with the generic driver. Yeah, it's worth exploring, and if it is something we can discuss with that in that collaborative view as well, that might be a topic. Because when you're adding any kind of testing, yes, the Tempest test might only be able to do, okay, how do I create an encryption type with my share type? How do I set something in this data? What is the response kind of a thing? But we won't be able to do an end-to-end test really unless we can also get it implemented in some reference
Yeah,
Games.
framework.
end-to-end test case is possible with second case only in this case.
Right. So it's worth taking a look, I think, because it obviously gives us more than one advantage of how to do that.
Yeah, I'll try to give some time, see how we can use the Barbican again in the backend driver
Yeah,
to perform the encryption.
makes sense. And a few of us know what to do, how the generic driver works. So feel free to ask any questions as such.
Yeah, okay. Because
It's
the
pretty
use case
straightforward.
that we were targeting was case two only.
Mhm.
But while doing that, so I found that Cinder is using the Barbican, which is part of OpenStack. So I thought let's support the case one as well,
Yeah,
where the key manager is also, I mean, Manila is being also able to talk with the key manager.
right.
But I haven't looked into the second part where the key is passed to the backend driver and then backend will again talk with the key manager and
Yeah,
perform the actual encryption. But I'll take into the loop. I'll take a look into generic driver and try to compare it with a Cinder
yeah,
and see how it works, or whether it's feasible or not, something like this.
makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else on this topic?
Maybe only one last question. What is our ultimate goal? So, see, tomorrow we create a share. We mount to the share with the VM, right? So I log into the VM, and so I go to the share. I mean that whatever share we created, right? So there I write some data. So those data should not be in clear text. That's a goal here, right? Like nobody should be able to
Yeah.
read the data.
All right. The
Yeah, that's a goal.
encryption is for yeah.
Yeah,
The encryption is for the security purpose. So right now,
yeah.
whatever we are doing the manually, thereby using the external key manager, we have to do this using the Manila.
Okay. Okay. So my one and only question is when VM is writing data to the share, and if you use some encryption key, which that VM is not aware of that, how VM will be able to read that data? Only those
That
kind of
is
questions.
that is
I mean,
that is
that is what
this
running in my mind. Yeah.
encryption. This
Maybe sorry if I
encryption.
misunderstood something. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
this
Yeah.
encryption and decryption happens at the hardware level.
Hardware
So
level. Okay.
as an end user, we don't need to worry about what is happening.
Okay.
So we just
Okay.
need to kind of
Okay.
configure the encryptor guy, and he will take care of everything.
Okay. Okay. We come out of VM layer. We just look at only that hardware layer. I mean, okay, backend layer. There only we do encryption. That's what you mean. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
how the
That's what.
external
That's what.
key
That is how
manage.
we are. Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay.
So
But
basically,
Cinder
even if
doesn't do like that. Yeah.
tomorrow,
Cinder
if
is
you
doing more. Okay.
yeah, Cinder is doing more. Here, the
Yeah.
use
More.
case
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
is to pass this key, which customer is currently passing manually.
Okay. Okay.
So basically, they create the share and then they use this encryption external key manager. So with this way, they invoke the external key manager as a part of Manila share creation itself. So we don't need to worry about the encryption because that happens at the hardware level. The another
Correct.
use case is probably when you replace the external key manager from one region to the another region. Uh, with the key, you can securely access the data, so it will remain the safe because everything happens at the hardware level. You need not to look into what
Sure, sure.
how.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Anything?
Yeah, nothing on my side. Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right.
Okay.
Taking the
Thank
silence
you,
as no.
guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kiran and Sravana, and also Ivan for the discussion. I think we have one more topic for today, which is the database migration script squash proposed by Takashi. So Takashi kindly joined us. Welcome. So Takashi, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry for being late. It has been a kind of busy week with multiple topics going on. So, yeah. So, I so this one is, I think I discussed this shortly with Gautam as well as Carlos, and while we are looking into some the SQL alchemy problem during this cycle. But the one problematic thing I have found in the current Manila repository is that it contains too many the migration script. Here I mean the schema. When we are talking about the database migration, we have two types of migration. The first one is the schema migration, and the other is the data migration. And I haven't got the actual number, but if you open the schema migration, the directory where all of the schema migration scripts are stored, so you will see a kind of 70 or even the 60 kind of these Python script which do the every single the my schema update from the quite old base version. So I wonder if we can, because these some of these are created in the quite old days like Liberty or even in the older releases. So I wonder if we can squash some of these so that we reduce the file we have to maintain the repo so that we can more easily adapt to the new upcoming breaking changes we would expect for new SQL alchemy, especially. So I did some, the initial work in here. So that's it. The patch currently opened it, my initial thing. So, and this is based on the very manual step. So I picked up the initial. What we have to do here is to put on the eventual migration step by step onto the init migration. So this is what I've tried so far. But I'm wondering if anyone has any better idea about this, because this is a kind of I mean I think we have to determine the strategy here, because the one option is to doing this manual squash, but I'm afraid that doing this manual squash in the too many layer is a kind of messy. That you have to be careful about reviewing all the schemas. The other options I can think of is to using the Alembic auto generation, like the creating the schema at the certain release, and then you can put, for example, you can check out the Victoria release, and then you can generate the initial migration script. You can remove all of the migration script in the directory and generate the initial, the new initial script using the Alembic. And then you can switch back to the master and keep the other, the existing, keep the other script added after Victoria till the current master. So that will be a kind of the automatic option I was trying to explore, but I have failed because of some reason, like because it is a little bit tricky to to use the older version, because of the defined Python version supported or some kind of thing. So I'm just wondering. I was just wondering if we can first agree with doing this. I mean, at least spending some time or effort on this, because I think the current situation is quite messy, and given the situation, I mean, there's some troubles or challenges we have seen for recent schema alchemy thing is, the growing the overall concern. So I'm just wondering if we can, I mean, agree on this direction, and I'm wondering if anyone else has a better idea or the preference about the way we move forward. And if anyone else, I can take some time to do all this, but because given the number of the patches we number of the script we have, it's a little bit tight and difficult for me to guarantee all the work being done here. So if wonder if I mean I can have some help or anybody else can take over this work. I mean to move a little bit forward during this cycle. So that's the overall thing I wanted to discuss during this time.
Yeah, a lot of questions. Firstly, thank you for proposing this. If you don't mind me, I want to take a couple of those
Yeah,
right now. Firstly, I mean, it's 1 a.m. your time. It's crazy that you're on a call. Uh,
no
um,
problem.
yeah. So second, the patch that you had, yes, we haven't done it for a long time. It's a hygiene thing that we've just not been able to, we've not been on top of it. 70 migrations. It's crazy. It should not affect production systems that much if they're going from release to release, but it does affect even like a first time setup because you're simply
Yeah,
churning through a bunch of code that doesn't matter to you at all, including dev stack, including the other aspect that we've continuously hit in the gates, which is once in a while
yeah,
we're running on Rackspace Cloud or something, and we do a DB migration test, and this Rackspace Cloud is running this test on an old hardware, and it takes forever. Maybe up to like 15 to 20 minutes to run through all those database migrations that we've had, because we do the walk in almost an exponential manner, right? We go up, down, up, down, up, down with every migration, throwing in data and validating that data, how those migrations are tested, and so on. And this sort of thing is gonna help that at least, because you reduce the number of migrations that we are this thing, because these are ancient. Nobody should run into a situation where they're operating from that release to something like
yeah.
leaping forward to the current time or something. So I'm in total support of doing this, but I don't think I have the answers for sure for the how do I generate the migration scripts. It might be something that we can check with Mike himself,
Yeah,
and he's been paying some attention to the migration scripts, and which is kind of why your patch went into merge conflict, because he helped fix a whole bunch of inconsistent things in the latest version of Alembic, from the time that we were that we had those migrations. Um, so it might be something that we can ask him, but I think in the past we've asked him how do we generate migrations automatically, and he said it's not really that well flushed out, because you could have magic variables and things like that in your models,
mhm.
those things are not. I mean, you'd have to go through it again, manually, in case even if you tried that Alembic auto generate
Okay.
stuff. That's what he had told us few releases ago, if this thing. So
Mhm,
there's
mhm,
actually a note, I think, in the dev ref that says,
mhm.
you can generate this, but there's no guarantee that it'll be correct.
Okay.
So you'd have to do this again by hand, kind of thing. And usually, somebody that's adding a new migration is just adding a one field or something, so they don't even take the pain to do this.
Mhm.
But I can understand when you're combing through old migrations and trying to squash them, this would be a great help. So I could post the question. We could post the question to him maybe on publicly on OpenStack Discuss, or just have him
Okay.
come
Okay.
to this review and give us his feedback. What do you think?
Y- Yeah, I think that that's that's quite nice. Yeah. So I studied this work, but my main concern about this is that this is a kind of huge task if we do all of this manually. So I wanted to look for any alternative approach with someone more knowledgeable about SQL alchemy and these Alembic stuff before I go into further. So yeah, if we can ask some feedback, I think asking the feedback from Mike or even Stephen will be quite a good first approach. And if they think that using the manual, doing the manual squash is the only option, feasible option we may have, then probably going through the manual squash 10 script squash in a single commit, for example, will be the only option we may have.
Yeah. And when you were doing this is when I discovered we had done this before. And it feels like it was because of a bug fix. So we'll run into situations like this where, if we don't fix our migrations, we're having to fix the code, and it probably doesn't matter to anyone. I think. So yeah, that makes sense. So I'll copy them and I will, get them in the discussion.
Okay. Yeah. If you can initiate that discussion, in the public way or private way, then that would be nice. I mean, assuming that you all have more connection with Mike and Steven now, so I think if you can, have some casual chat with them, that would be kind of quite helpful for here, I think.
Yes, and I like your suggestion at squashing, a particular set, maybe 10 at a time.
Yeah,
makes things
10
easier.
or 5 or something. Yeah.
My confusion though is when you start hitting the first data migration, what happens? Because I've not thought of that myself. So far, whatever we've squashed have been schema migrations.